Fingers crossed. I was a little bit surprised. I'm glad you threw those two out there.
Have a word with the medics and the physio and saying, are you doing the right things here? But I think there are grounds for optimism. We are going to change in style.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Premier Pundits preview. Try saying that after a few beers. Today, I'm glad to welcome Richard Forster to the show, writer, author, owner of the football9.com website, regular contributor to Guardian Sport, and taking time out of his extremely busy schedule. He's currently in the rewrite of the Premier League Nuggets book and the Agony and the Ecstasy. So, Richard, thank you once again for joining me, my friend. We've been in touch quite a bit over the internet, but maybe this will be the first time we've actually spoken in person. So I'm very glad and privileged to speak to you in person.
Oh no, very pleased to see you, and I didn't realise you looked like that. So that's a bonus. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, my Twitter bio does not do me justice whatsoever. I am sitting in my virtual office today. I've been kicked out of the real one. So I'm hot desking, and this is it. So I wouldn't normally be in these such salubrious surroundings. But of course, we're here to talk about Crystal Palace, and I'm looking ahead to next season, and me, amongst the many, I'm presuming, will just be at a bit of a loss at where we are at this moment in Crystal Palace in terms of, personnel and managerial. With so many changes at the club. We normally start these previews by, having a quick look back over the previous campaign and maybe identifying some of those moments which we consider a success, maybe areas which the team need to improve, to maybe take the team onto that next level. But given what's happened over the summer, can we almost just forget about everything that happened under Roy Hodgson? And here we are with a new philosophy and a man with new ideas and Patrick Viera, and hopefully is there optimism there for Crystal Palace fans and supporters?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I don't want to airbrush Roy Hodgson out of history because he did a great job in solidifying what was at the time a little rather shaky ship, because we had the Frank de Boer experiment, which, as you know, lasted all of 4 Premier League games. So he did a great job. I think, due respect to him, and we're now entering our 9th consecutive Premier League season. Considering, this club has only been in the top flight for, and that's going back before the Premier League, for 4 seasons at the most. Coming up to our 9th season, clearly the most successful period in this club's history. And I think people forget that a little bit. And, okay, so Hodgson's football was not the most dynamic, but it did the job, and we've become this, relatively settled club in between 10th and 15th, which we've finished every one of the last 8 seasons. And, I think, all due respect to Hodgson, but you're right. I think the slate has been wiped clean somewhat, and we now have our new manager, which wasn't without its problems, because obviously we went originally for Nuno, and he wanted to bring all his backroom staff and a bit more, and that wasn't going to work. And then we had Lucien Favre, who literally was on the point of signing a contract. It was meant to be, he was sleeping on it, sign it the next morning. Obviously, he didn't sleep very well. He didn't sign it. He didn't come. So, that is difficult for the club. And, Steve Parish and the directors got a lot of flack saying, "Oh, we can't sort this out." But if someone ducks out at the last minute, well, what are you meant to do? You can't force them into it. And then you've got to start again. So you've got to go back to where you were, 6 months ago almost, because obviously they didn't just say, "Oh God, Patrick Viera." I know he was considered originally, and you could see the fact that Hodgson was going to leave quite a way off. I mean, it wasn't a great surprise. I think most people agreed it was the right time to do it, to move on. He's 74 next month, so he's not a spring chicken. And I am quite excited by Viera. You know, obviously he hasn't got the sort of managerial experience of a Roy Hodgson, but you know, I think the most interesting thing for Palace fans is that he was involved in the Man City academy, and that is where a lot of the optimism comes from, because our academy is now becoming one of the best. You know, we only got Category 1 status last year, and already the under-18s came second in their division. The under-23s got promoted to the top division. That's in the first year of being Category 1. Mm. So they are, you know, there is talent there. And we've seen it come through before, because obviously we've had Zaha come through, we've had Wan-Bissaka, and in the current team, we've got Tariq Mitchell. So these are the sort of players that are coming up through the academy, and we want to see more of that. And you know, one of the aspects that was disappointing about last season was our age, and everyone knows that we were the oldest team in the Premier League. I think we fielded something like 20 of the oldest teams in the 38 matches, and particularly at centre back, where our youngest centre back, who didn't play very much, is Martin Kelly. He's 31. So you know, that's not a vision for the future, is it? You know, and Gary Cahill, I do have a huge amount of respect for, but he's 35. You know, and you need young legs, and this is where we need almost like a blood transfusion. And the encouraging thing is, obviously we've got Eze, who was a superb addition last season. You know, got him from QPR. I thought he made a real impact in the Premier League in his first season. Unfortunately, he had that Achilles tendon injury. And you know, will know better than I, but he's out probably for probably till the end of this year. Unbelievably, we also had another Achilles injury, Nathan Ferguson, about 3 days after poor old Eze. So, I mean, Nathan Ferguson is an example of another young player we bought. He hasn't even played one game for us yet, because he came injured. He then had another injury, and now he's had an Achilles injury. So I'm not quite sure whether we're ever going to see him in a Palace shirt. So we have had, you know, we were as again, you will know, I think we had the second most injured days out of the Premier League last season, behind Liverpool. And that's something you need to address, because obviously the age is an issue. So if you've got old players, it takes longer for them to recover. They're more likely to get injuries, although I've just highlighted 2 injuries for very young players. Unbelievably, we then get Michael Elise from Reading as another great transfer. He's young Championship Player of the Year last season with Reading. Apparently, he's injured now. So I don't know what the curse is around Selhurst Park. I might have a word with the medics and the physio and saying, "Are you doing the right things here?" But you know, I think there are grounds for optimism. We are going to change in style. We are, you know, Hodgson played with a handbrake on, which I understood why, because he just didn't want to go full pelt because he thought we'd get exposed. Again, the irony is we got smashed 7-0 by Liverpool. We lost 3-0 to Villa, awful game when they had a player sent off. And, you know, there were times where even with our so-called robust defence, we didn't look that strong. But what all Palace fans want to see is a bit more attacking flair, a bit more dynamism. Let them go. You know, we've got the players. And obviously, Wilfried Zaha has been our main asset for the last 7 years. And he will remain so, assuming he will stay. As we discussed a bit earlier, there is less noise about him leaving in this summer than there probably has been ever. I mean, it's still mentioned, but I think the thing with Wilf is he's now of an age where I just don't see a big club, as in the Big Six, buying him, because I just don't think he's quite at that level, and he wouldn't get, you know, regular football. Anyone below that will probably think we can't afford him. You know, he's not quite fitting into the classic. Oh, he's young enough to go forward. He isn't young anymore. He's 28. So.
Do you think a lot of those maybe rumours or the media speculation with regards to Zaha potentially moving in summers gone by were maybe driven by the player, his agent, but now almost with Patrick Viera arriving at the club, and this distinct shift in terms of the philosophy in the way that Palace are going to set up for the upcoming season. We've heard Martin Kelly talk about how Viera is drilling them on the training pitches. He's saying, look, he wants us to retain the ball more. We're going to play in blocks, higher up the pitch. And this is about, and I thought it was a strange comment, because I always thought that Wilfried Zaha was always the key man for Palace. But what he said was, we're going to focus on ensure we've got Wilfried Zaha out wide, and we're going to make sure that he's isolating those defenders one-on-one, and, you know, we're going to cash in on that. And I thought, well, is that not what's already been happening anyway? But, you know, is Wilfried Zaha being the focal point of that Palace attack? Do you think that's maybe affording maybe Zaha that, you know, that little bit of optimism and thinking, well, actually, you know, maybe Viera can take this club onto the next level, and maybe, you know, what's to say we can't go top half, and maybe even an outside chance of possibly reaching, you know, one of those European places?
Don't get carried away now, Ben. Yeah, I mean, he will be a focal point. And it was great when Eze played, because he was, you know, taking a little bit off Wilf's shoulders, because he is that ball-carrying player. Michael Elise apparently is also a ball-carrying player, so maybe he will come. But he's very young, and he's had no Premier League experience, so you can't expect him to hit the ground running. It will be a different formation. It obviously, as you say, I think Viera insists on playing out from the back. He wants people to, you know, as you say, play in blocks, as it were. And then it'll just be interesting where he does play Wilf, because he's been moved around a little bit, and, you know, sometimes he plays, you know, up front with off the big man. Sometimes he plays wide. What his best position is, I prefer him a little bit further forward. I mean, one of the players I'm quite looking forward to seeing is Benteke, because he obviously had a horrible period where he hardly scored a goal. I mean, again, he was injured for a while and out of the team. But towards the end of last season, he looked like he was getting back to where he was when he was at Villa, and just looked like a player with a bit of confidence. And as we all know, centre forwards need confidence. If they've got it, they start to, you know, come off. And, you know, he scored a few goals, which is encouraging. And I think at his best, he could be another asset of someone we haven't really seen over the last couple of seasons. So, you know, you don't need to go and buy a 20-goal striker, because actually we've got one there. He just hasn't, you know, reached his former potential. So if he can start firing, obviously Zaha was the top scorer last season, but I would have thought Benteke would be someone to watch, and hopefully he hits the ground running again at the start of next season.
Yeah, I agree that Benteke went under the radar for a lot of people, but his form towards the end of the last campaign is, and if he can carry that level of momentum forward, I mean, for me, and I know Palace have only had one game, that was the 1-0 win at Warsaw at the weekend, but, you know, they tapered off badly, you know, towards the end of last season. I think they just had 2 wins in their last 10. The goals against column wasn't very pretty. I think they conceded 66, which was the 3rd worst in the Premier League. But we talked about, you know, Viera wants to play them a little bit higher up the pitch. And is that where Palace's strengths lie, in that attacking third? Because as it currently stands, you know, you've got some aging assets in that back line. There was, we've seen the departure of the likes of Sakho, Wayne Hennessy, Van Aanholt. Is Mark Guiu, is he a player that's going to come in and drop into that back line, or do you think Viera is going to stick with what he's got, or, you know, is there potential, or is there cash there available to maybe bring in 1 or 2 players? Because from the outside looking in, that starting 11 doesn't look too bad on paper, but given the fact that what we've seen historically with availability and the number of injuries, it's the depth that would be a concern, and all of those players who have left makes that Palace squad overall just a little bit weaker.
Yeah, I think you're right. And Gay is actually a really interesting purchase. I know he's very highly regarded at Chelsea, and a lot of their fans are actually a bit upset that he's left. So I would like to think that he will come into centre back, and therefore you could then play a Cahill alongside him because you've got the young legs and then you've got the old head. You know, it's a classic combination. I mean, Cahill won't play every game if indeed he's retained. But what I'd like to also see is Cheikhou Kouyate, who was brought in. You know, he played nearly every game as a centre back. He's not a centre back. He's a central midfield player. So it'd be quite nice to see him back in his natural position and see how he gets on. Because I think, again, he can provide dynamism in there. We missed James Mcarthur last season because he got injured. He was out for most of the second half of the season. He's not one of those players that, you know, any other club will go, oh, James Mcarthur, he's a great player, we need it. But he just does that knitting in midfield and he just does it really well. So in a way, he could be, again, important if he comes back fresh. Schlupp, another one who was injured, gives a lot of dynamism. So, you know, as you say, there is a reasonably good first 11 there. What is the problem is that we have got rid of quite a few players and we'll probably get rid of a few more. So and we brought a few in, okay, so we've got Gay, we've got Elise, we're apparently interested in Kabak from, you know, who was obviously at Liverpool last season.
The young guy from Georgetown University is an interesting one. Presumably, that's come off the back of Patrick Viera's contacts out in the US. Jacob Montes, 22, right, on a 1-year deal. Yeah, I mean that is a little bit left field. I've got absolutely no idea what to make of that one.
No. Nor I really, actually.
But I look at that Palace midfield, and I do a lot of stuff around predicted 11s and you know the teams, and I'm looking at that Palace team, and if we're right, we stick Kouyate back in there. Presumably, he's going to have Milivojevic captaining the side and starting potentially in there, and then the rest, like you say, I mean, who comes in? You've got Mcarthur, you've got Riedewald. I mean, I'm clutching at straws as trying to shoehorn some of those players in, given you know who Viera has a chance to you know the options that he has actually got in that team.
I mean, Mila Vojovic is again another interesting case in that he was a Sam Allardyce buy, and when he came, he made a difference because he is a very solid. You know, he's basically a central defensive midfield player. Obviously, scores lots of penalties, but his star really waned a little bit last season. I thought he lost a bit of form. He got suspended because he got sent off, and he never really got it back. And although he is club captain, I personally, he wouldn't be in my first 11.
Yeah.
So there's an issue there. I mean, obviously you can have a club captain who doesn't play, but yeah, I would rather freshen it up a bit. I would rather bring in, you know, I want to see Riedewald, for example. This is his season for me. You know, he played a lot of games last season, and he showed promise, but he wasn't consistent enough. And this is his season. I think if he doesn't really nail it this season, then I don't think he's going to make it at the top level. And obviously he was a Frank de Boer purchase, so you know he didn't have much time with him. But he's the sort of player that I'd like to see kick on.
Yeah,
I think we've got enough in the squad. I think we have enough in the first team to be okay. It's just how quickly do the new players fit into this? And you know, as I said earlier, the academy is a place which has got a lot of talent, and that might be the way to bring it through. And as Viera's experience at Man City, and then obviously he went, you know, to Nice and also to New York. New York, I don't really know enough about North American football, but Nice, you know, he did pretty well in his first 2 seasons. I mean, you know, they finished in European places, and okay, so he had a dip and he lost his job towards the end of that year. But I would have thought that Viera, going back to what you were saying there, is the sort of personality who will make the difference for a lot of players. Ooh, should I go to Palace? Oh, Patrick Vieira's there. Maybe I'll give it a try. So, you know what the magnet of a great football person is, and let's face it, Viera was one of the best players we've had the privilege of seeing. Whether he's as good a manager is to be proved, but it does make a difference to players. And I think if they see that sort of player as manager, they go, okay, this is a definite possibility.
I mean, we've heard already from James Mcarthur talk about Patrick Vieira, talk about a player who's been there, done it, some of the highest honours in the game that he's been, but he doesn't have that sort of air of arrogance. He's very approachable, and the players are wanting to play and they're wanting to impress him, and he has that aura about him. And I think that is, in the sessions already, there's been a lot of talk around, his influence there. But look, I don't want to keep you too long, Richard. Fantastic insight. I'm going to end on 2 questions.
Okay.
The first of all, I want maybe to identify a potential sort of academy prospect who could, use this maybe as a breakthrough season, almost a Tyreek Mitchell of last year. And I'll throw one out there as being Rob Street, potentially, who laid on the goal for Wilfried Zaha against Warsaw. And ultimately, just for our audience and for those interested in it from a fantasy perspective, which player do you think will have a standout season for Palace in your eyes? And don't worry, there will be no comebacks whatsoever if they fall flat on their face.
Are you absolutely sure about that?
Look, I can guarantee you will not be trolled on the internet. This is, it's a very safe environment that we're creating here. There's a lot of love. So do not, there's no pressure.
Okay, cool. I think the player who is most likely to make an impact from the academy is Raksaki, who has impressed. He got into the first team squad for a couple of times, didn't come on because Roy wasn't ever that keen on bringing young players onto the pitch. But I think he's got real potential, and I'd like to see him included. I mean, it's interesting because Viera's first few sessions, obviously, a lot of the academy players were there because we had, however many players out of contract, so they're not going to turn up. And I happen to know that the under-23s had at least 6 or 7 players training with the first team squad, and obviously some of the first team squad weren't there because they were at the Euros. And that, blooding them in that, I think is really interesting. They, under-23s, under-18s, as I said earlier, had a very successful season. It's not easy, and we've seen so many players, it's making that transition from the under-23s to the first team is difficult. But I would highlight him as potentially one to look out for. In terms of our key player this season, I think there are, if I'm allowed to.
Please, the floor is yours, Richard.
I think Kouyate has been superb and one of the best keepers we have had that I've seen in my time following Palace, which is many, many years. And I think if he stays as good or improves, I think that just gives us such a solid base to go from. I would hope. I mean, the other player that I really want to see develop is Elise, because I just have this feeling he could be the next Wilf. He could be the next Eze. Unfortunately, as I say, Eze won't be playing in the early part of the season because he's out. Otherwise, it would have been him because, again, I thought he did so well last season, looked good generally, and I think he could kick on this season, but unfortunately, he won't get the chance early part of the season. So Elise is someone who I look forward to seeing. It was a bit like Eze last season. Everyone wanted to see him. He got introduced and eventually made his mark. And I think Elise is the guy who could do it this season.
Yeah, cool. 19 goal involvements at Reading in the second tier, 7 goals and 12 assists. So, fantastic, brilliant attacking prospect. Fingers crossed. I was a little bit surprised. I'm glad you threw those two out there. But Richard, really, really appreciate you joining us. It's Richard Foster, writer, author, owner of the footballmind.com website, and author of Premier League Nuggets and the Agony and the Ecstasy books. You can maybe get the old copies from a bargain bin, but he's going through a revise at the moment. So keep your eyes and ears peeled, and there will be a new book coming out very soon. All the links in the comments below. Thanks everybody for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. And that's Palace done for now. Thank you, Richard.
A pleasure.